Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I actually spoke at an MBA class at the U last night, and so I get to do this twice. And it's always fun for me to be back in the classroom because, really my passion is in working with teachers and students. So you heard a little bit about my bio, and I understand that this is about leadership. What do you guys think so far? What does it mean? What would be some of the characteristics of a leader that you would say? Or actually, let's do this. Tell me who are some good examples of leaders that you guys know of that we might all know, some famous. Anyone heard of maybe Elon Musk? Maybe. Would he be a leader?
Leaders all be the last people.
The what?
They always consider other people to be first.
People to be first. Okay, yeah. Yeah, that's there's this I heard Tim Cook say, you either lead by being the best, the fastest, or the cheapest. So, that's how businesses can lead, and you pick one. Any other leaders that you guys are familiar with, maybe here locally in Utah?
Mitt Romney.
Mitt Romney is a leader, yeah. He, even before he became state senator, he was a governor. He also led the Olympics here in Utah, and also started Bain Capital, which is a huge investment firm, global investment firm. Anyone else here in Utah?
We talked about one last week, Colin Powell.
Colin Powell, yep, yeah, a phenomenal leader, yep, absolutely. Any other ones?
I also like Congressman Chris Stewart.
Chris Stewart, okay. Yeah, he's District 4, I believe, in Utah. Yeah, served in the Air Force, I believe.
Right.
Yeah. So, I think it's really interesting because I think that when, I'm here speaking about the leadership forum, I don't ever think like, oh, I'm a leader in this or whatever, you never go into it thinking like that. But one of the things that's kind of driven me in my career is understanding what I'm passionate about and then trying to work in order, because I wish like I was motivated by money when it came to jobs. I'm actually very much not motivated by money. I admire the ones that are. But for me, what drives me is passion about a particular project or a problem that I want to solve. And so when I started out in my career, as I started out in tech, like one of the experiences I had is, I met the two co-founders of Instructure. This was back in 2009. This was back when, if you think about technology in that day, some people had laptops, not everybody had laptops. Smartphones weren't necessarily ubiquitous at the time. And they were just starting to put like content and classes online. And they were using the system called Blackboard that everybody hated because it would literally like crash on them when they're like, if you can imagine working on a paper and it crashing and it didn't have like autosave and they would lose all their work, things like that. When I met the two co-founders from Instructure, they were students at BYU, and they said, "Hey, I have a learning management system that we want to start this company." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, everybody has an LMS. I don't know what the big deal is." And it could do things that you guys would laugh, but you could use the back button. In Blackboard, you could not use the back button. And that was revolutionary at the time. And they just felt like, as students, they were so tired of using the crappy LMS that the school had paid millions and millions of dollars for. So they decided to create a better one. And I joined that company as your professor said, I was employee 7. When I left, it was maybe 500 employees, and then they went public. And then I think probably now they're at 1,500 employees, global company. But it really just started out with just this idea of let's just make that learning experience better. And they certainly wanted to lead out on that. When going through that experience, I was extremely lucky to be at a startup that was successful. Because most companies and startups just fail, or they might have success, but it's a lot slower, it takes a longer time, or it's a much smaller version of success. So coming off the high of, I just had this successful career, I decided to do my own startup. And that was called Because Learning. And it was taking STEM education and using space as the vehicle to teach STEM education. Super cool. I mean, and I got to go to NASA. I got to watch rocket launches. I visited companies that were making products for mission to Mars. It was incredible. But faced a lot of challenges. Have any of you guys thought about building your own company, like just by raise of hands? You've thought of it? Yeah, so I don't want to discourage you by this story. So, but I think there's some things that you should be aware of when you go into it. Like it's hard work, you know, but it's incredibly rewarding. And the highs and the lows are not, it's not linear. Your growth is not linear. You know, it can be like you can have a win and then you can have something bad happen and it can go up and down and you're just kind of all over the place. And as a founder, you know, you really kind of bear the brunt of that responsibility because you've convinced people to come join your team and you've said, hey, come do this with me. You've put out there that, you know, that you're going to build this thing. So your friends and your family are watching with your success. And then you have to make sure that there's money in the bank to pay people. And you can do that through a couple ways. You can get it through revenue, meaning selling the product, whatever it is, if it's something physical or if it's like software and there's a subscription, or you can also raise money. And we decided to go the route of raising money, which meant that I was going to be meeting with venture capitalists to say, hey, give me millions of dollars and I'm going to build this thing. And it's not, I mean, you know, Silicon Valley and all of that. I mean, and you see these great success stories, but when you raise venture capital, the most important thing is fast growth. And when you take that money, you're all of a sudden, there are expectations on you, right? So it's like, you know, if you were bootstrapping means like you're not taking investment, you know, you're just growing as your money comes in, as you sell stuff. But, you know, if you do that, you can have a longer trajectory and you only grow as fast as you need to. And in some cases, when you raise venture capital, it's growth and sometimes growth at all costs. And you see companies like, maybe like an Uber, who, you know, their goal is to get into every city. So there was a period of time where every Uber ride was costing them $7, right? The math doesn't work, right? When I am Uber and I'm paying because I have to pay drivers, I have to do insurance, I have my overhead costs, I have marketing, all of that kind of stuff. It was costing them $7 for every ride that they got paid to do. But how did they do that? They raised through venture capital. It was subsidizing because the growth was more important to them. You saw the same thing. Do you guys remember MoviePass? Do you remember that? A couple of years ago, you paid like, I don't know, it was like $10, $20 for a subscription to movie theaters, and you could see as many movies as you want, right? Like you see 2 movies and you've already like hit 2 ticket prices. So people were just going and using it, and they went out of business, you know, because at some point they couldn't raise enough money to keep that going. But anyways, for me, I decided we wanted to raise venture capital. So I spent a lot of time on the road meeting with VCs over in San Francisco and, you know, New York, and Utah was just starting to have their own venture capital scene. Now it's more mature, you know, and I was able to raise $1 million. And then it's kind of go time, and you have to quickly figure out how you're going to make the most money or have the highest growth. The one thing I found out is that once you take money, then there's expectations on you. Like you go into a board meeting and they'll say, oh, you have $1 million, so why aren't your revenues at this? Or why haven't you sold to this many schools? Or why haven't you done it? So those expectations got higher and higher, and that was really surprising to me. And so had to subsequently, because we weren't hitting quite the metrics, I had to subsequently raise additional rounds. And one of the things that when you're a founder too is because you've there's so much responsibility on your shoulders, because you're responsible for payroll. All of a sudden you start thinking about the people that work for you and their kids, and can they, like their livelihoods. So it's a lot of pressure. And so, it's a very lonely position to be in, because you can't go into work and say, I hate my job, because if you do that, then everybody's like, what am I doing here, So you really kind of have to put on that brave face. But the one thing that I learned is that's not a healthy environment. So you have to have your outlet, and you have to have people that you can talk to and be real with. And for me, that was other founders, particularly women founders, who kind of understood some of the struggles. Because when you raise venture capital as a woman, only 2% of all the billions of dollars that get invested actually go to women-led companies. So it's a very small percentage. Juggling family and, responsibilities as a parent and things like that, it was really tough. And so there was people that I would just call and say, like on the way home, and I could say, hey, I'm having a terrible day, I had this horrible meeting, whatever it was. That gave me the outlet that I needed to do so that I could kind of get through the whole experience. So when I had my company, we were working classrooms, I got to travel to Dubai and China and all these other places. And we really started to be on a trajectory, and then COVID hit. And we're a product that was designed for classrooms. It was physical. It was this kit that they could work with sensors and microcontrollers, and designed to be in an in-classroom environment with students working as teams. So as you can imagine, that was not a product that was very conducive to the online learning environment. And we knew that it wasn't, no matter what we did, it wasn't a situation where we could change much, and they're just teachers and students, and you guys know this, you're just trying to survive. You're trying to figure out this online thing. And so now is not the time to be pushing product. So decided that it would probably be a good time to sell the company. And what that looked like was you really start to look at the company, your assets, your revenue, any intellectual property you've created, your trademarks and all of that, and say, what is this worth? And you make up a number based on that, and you can do some, you can do your revenue times a certain multiplier, or you can say, hey, I invested this much in this product, and so it's worth that much, or here's the future potential. You can do things like that, but really you're kind of making it up. So you put out a number, and you start putting out feelers, and you start talking to people that might be already in your market that would be interested in either the assets, the company, the people. It's whatever you're placing that value on. And we found a company that does space education stuff as well. And we had, met each other at trade shows and helped them out a little bit, and they helped us. And I threw it out to them, and they said, yeah, let's do this. So it took about a year for that whole process to happen. So it took a really, really long time. And there's just a lot that you have to unload, because not only are you unloading product, but you're having to unload knowledge, and you're having to unload customers and things like your website and your Twitter handle. And, there's just all these things that go into it. But we were able to wrap that up in 2021. And at that time I thought, now what do I do next? And one of the key things that, again, going back to, like, I'm not driven by money. And I also kind of was used to being my own boss. I didn't necessarily want to go into a big organization and kind of just do a regular job. So I really started looking for something to build. And I got heavily involved with Silicon Slopes, the people at Silicon Slopes. And they asked me to help out on public policy stuff. So I didn't actually know what that meant, but, you know, I was, interested in helping. And it was, hey, whenever the legislature has some bills that they want to pass, if there's something that we're opposed to or that we want to support, we can make a statement, we can talk to the legislators, all of that stuff. And when I attended a couple meetings with legislators, and it was very apparent that tech was not represented at the legislature. A lot of the legislature is are realtors, lawyers, just not, no one from tech. And so when we were talking about the growth and the things that we needed in order to, grow our companies, it kind of fell on deaf ears. And so based on that experience, I decided to start Utah Tech Leads. It's an offshoot of Silicon Slopes. And Utah Tech Leads, we do policy and advocacy work for things that the tech industry cares about. And we did a survey, and tech is about 1 out of 7 jobs here in the state, and represents about 6,500 companies. And we did a survey among our community and said, what are the biggest issues that you're seeing here? And from the legislature side, they all thought that we cared about taxes, maybe cybersecurity, things like that. But actually, the community said, when we asked, what is the #1 reason that you would leave Utah? They said air quality. So that surprised them. #2, housing that's affordable. #3, diversity and inclusion. #4, economic growth. So all of these things was new information to the legislature. So we go and take that information and work with the legislature and work on bills to address these things. And it's been incredibly rewarding. I love this work because it gives me an opportunity to still work with tech companies, which that's my background and that's what I love to do. But I also get to learn something new working with policy makers and working on things that I think that will actually make our state better. And I think that the one thing you guys, in your careers, just recognize that because you do a job or you have a certain major or you do this, it doesn't solidify your path for the rest of your life. Your journey can take you in so many different ways. And so, when people would say, I'd be trying to recruit them to my company and I'd say, come work for this very risky startup. And they'd say, well, what if you fail? What if I leave my job and you fail? And I'm like, oh, then you just go get another job. It's that the risk is so small because I'm like, you're employable, you just go get another job. And they're like, oh, I never thought of it like that. You're not, these days, it's not uncommon for people to be changing jobs, every couple of years. But 15 years ago or so, like people stayed at their company and, kind of worked up the chain. But now it's, especially in tech, it's more common for people to switch and, do different things and learn different things. And, I encourage you guys to think about that because all the things that just be curious, just try and learn new things, try and be uncomfortable at times. That's where the most growth happens, is when you do something that you've never done before, or you're challenging yourself to do something a little bit different. But what it does is it really kind of provides that background for you to adapt and learn new things and really grow your career that way. And I think that's what I get most excited about thinking about this next generation of people, is that you have grown up in an area or in a time where, there is a lot of change, like technology is changing, environments are changing, the politics are changing so much. And so you are incredibly adaptable. So, don't feel like what you're doing right now, it means that is the way it's going to be forever. If there's a new opportunity, seek it out. If there are people that you can learn from, ask them, ask for mentorship. I think that's something that I wish I would have done more of, in my younger career. And I watch some amazing founders that see a problem and they take the risk and they decide that they're the ones to fix it. And you have to be a little delusional to think that you're gonna be successful. But that's really what you need. You need those blinders to be like, oh no, I can change this. And you don't know if you're gonna build the next Instructure or if you're gonna build the next Twitter. But if you can kind of just believe in yourself and recognize that if you've got the passion and then you've got the drive, that's most of it. And then I'd say like the other 30%, if that's 50% and then 30% is luck, there's a lot of luck involved in timing and meeting the right people. And then the 20% is just like straight up like grit, and being able to kind of weather the hard storms. If you've got that, then you really are set up, the foundational success of that is much more than sometimes what I see already with these guys that maybe have a silver spoon in their mouth and then they're just, building a company with their dad's money. They don't have that same tenacity and that same drive. So anyways, that's a little bit about me. I wanted to open up some questions and kind of talk to you guys about things that you might be interested in. Anything about entrepreneurship? Yeah.
I just had a question about like Utah Tech Leads.
Mm-hmm.
I know money's like not a big thing to you, but like where does your revenue come from, or do you have revenue?
Yeah, so I mean, it's still something we're figuring out. So Utah Tech Leads is an association, and so tech companies pay a membership, but that can only sustain us so much. So very early on, we built a spreadsheet with a budget and said, okay, because I've got people on payroll now, what are my costs and what do I need to raise? And can I do that through memberships, or are there other things that I need to build in terms of like sponsorships or other things like, or even like a contract lobbying work that I can do to supplement that? It is different than building like a for-profit company, because for me, I'm just trying to build, get enough to sustain what I'm building. Whereas, a for-profit company are always about driving growth. Any other questions?
Did you get a patent?
I inherited a patent.
Oh, the luck, huh?
Yeah, I inherited a patent. So I worked with a company out in San Francisco that builds and launches tiny micro satellites. They're called CubeSats. These are 10 by 10 by 10 centimeters satellites. What's so cool about them is that because they're so small, you can actually just put them on existing rocket launches. And it used to be the satellites were, I mean, they still are, they can be ginormous and it requires its own rocket to go up. But these tiny ones can kind of almost like hitch a ride on that. And so the cost is much cheaper for those to launch. And they had a patent that they gave to me, and it was for a sensor board. And what happened is with the evolution of smartphones and these computers that we all have in our pockets, right? That made sensors much smaller, which meant that satellite sensors could get much smaller too. And so we did, and we sold that. We sold that patent.
Oh, okay. Oh, with your company?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. That was one of the assets that they valued.
Mm-hmm.
What other questions do you guys have? Of the ones that you said you wanted to build a company, did I talk you out of it? Or did I because I always wanted people to go in. I think it's important to recognize what you're getting yourself into, but did I discourage you in any way, encourage you? Or did you already know this? What about you?
I've always kind of thought I'm gonna start my own company. I just don't know like what it's gonna be yet.
Yeah.
I think that was very encouraging, just knowing what you're gonna do and how hard it's gonna be.
Yeah, it's hard, but I mean, I'll tell you, like the work is so much fun. So there was an instance when I was at Instructure that there was no customers. I mean, we had like maybe one who was like got it for free. And the state of Utah decided, the Utah Education Network, that the whole system, that meant all higher education institutions, so SLCC and the U and SUU all needed a new learning management system. So they put out an RFP, which is a request for proposal, and they say, this is what we're looking for. We responded, and so did the two other big competitors, and we won the deal. And we were in this tiny room where literally like people are on top of each other. Our conference room table was a flattened cardboard box top on some legs or something. I don't know how, we had a projector on it. And we won that deal. It was a $17 million deal. So if you can imagine, we went from having like 10K in revenue to like 17 million that was coming in, was going to be huge. And then what was crazy, and this is what happens when it's just luck, one of the people that responded to the RFP sued the state and said, we don't think it's fair and that you didn't do a fair process, because there's no way a tiny company like Instructure could have won this deal. And that made the news. And then all of a sudden, all the higher education institutions across the US were like, what is this? It just put us on the map because they did something dumb that was, newsworthy. And we got 10,000 leads overnight from different professors that wanted to look at our system. Sheer luck, right? Like just sheer luck. And so if you can imagine, that's crazy hard work. I mean, it was literally like the system was being built as we were trying to implement it. But super rewarding, never worked so hard in my life, never been so stressed out in my life, but super rewarding.
So I'm curious, how do you go finding the people that like get all the expertise that you need to start that company?
You really, there's usually like a formula, like if you're building a tech company, they usually want two co-founders to say, one's the business-minded one, one's the technical-oriented one. And I mean, there are companies that have, certainly successful ones like Facebook, that really was more single founder focused. But I had a co-founder, and so I had this idea, but I also recognized that I needed someone with more technical expertise. And so I just started kind of putting it out there. And what's so great about Utah and the tech scene is that it is very collaborative and it's very easy to meet people. Whereas in like the Bay Area or New York, it's just a little bit harder because it's a little bit more competitive. But there is a very welcoming community here in Utah. And so I just started putting out feelers, and someone said, hey, I've got a buddy that, he works with sensors, and, so I met with him and I was like, you want to be my co-founder? And he was like, sure, and so we did this together. And then when I needed to hire salespeople, I had a lot of contacts. When we needed to hire engineers, he had a lot of contacts. So you just kind of do that. But yeah, you want, like, the founder shouldn't be the expert in everything. And certainly if you're a venture-backed company, you're most likely going to be raising money. I mean, that's just the reality, because they want to hear the founder story. They want to hear why you're building this product, why you're so passionate about it. And that in itself is a full-time job. So you need to have really good people that can continue to build and grow the product while you're out there on the road raising capital.
Yep. I'm just curious kind of like what the process is for getting that venture capital. Like, do you email people, then you kind of email the chain of people, then you meet board directors, or how does that exactly work?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. It's one of those, it's a terrible process because there's nothing I despise more than raising money, because they're having to like brag about yourself and then say, give me some money. It just feels like it doesn't feel good to me, but that's what you end up doing. But what you typically do is you need to decide, you basically have to build your story. And that's usually what they refer to as the pitch deck. And there usually is a flow of what is the problem you're solving? Why is it you that fixes it? What is the market potential? What do you think, what will you do if you raise money? And things like that. So you really just build the story. And typically what happens is you have your deck, you get intros into different VCs, and there's so many VCs out there. I mean, some that invest in seed rounds, some that do like later growth stage. So you want to kind of start cultivating a list of VCs that you think might be interested in investing in your company. And you just do a lot of research on their site. Like, do they invest in companies like yours? Maybe they don't do hardware companies, or maybe they only focus on consumer-based companies, or maybe they only invest in companies that are in Utah and in other states, so you start doing your research and you build your list. And then the number one thing is, it's so much easier to get a warm intro into these VCs. So you start looking on LinkedIn and say, who do I know that would know a partner that works there or an associate that works there? And then you craft an email with like a little blurb of you and the company and your deck, and you forward it to your friend that's going to make the intro. And if they're interested, then they'll connect you to. And that warm intro is really important, and that's why networking is really key. And once the whole goal is for them to say yes to that next meeting, because it usually is multiple meetings. And what happens is, if you get the intro and they say, yeah, I'm interested, they'll probably do a phone call with you, and you talk to them for half an hour. You only have a half an hour. And you have to make yourself sound so interesting that they have enough ammunition to go to their partner meeting and say, I talked to so-and-so, she's got a really cool company. I think we should consider having her come in and pitch. So it's always that next goal. And if you do that, then and it goes well, then usually they'll give you a term sheet saying, hey, they'll invest so much. You work out the details, and then you come to a contract agreement. I've seen rounds that, like my first round, the first million I raised, in hindsight, that was probably my easiest round, because people are more willing to take risk on an idea, and you have to have a little bit of traction, some sort of proof that so it's either revenue or maybe a deal coming in or something like that. But then each subsequent round gets a little bit harder because they have expectations, and it took me probably 4 months to raise my first million, and then my next million took 9 months. So I mean, it can really, and I've seen people that never get to raise again, So it was really, one of the things you'll find out is, even when you run out of money, it doesn't mean it's the end of the company. You got to be super scrappy and figure out ways to, like, there was a period of time where we were going to make payroll. I had a partner who needed engineers, so I contracted out our engineers to make payroll. I charged him like $180 an hour per engineer, and he just happened to have a lot of money. He said, sure, yeah, I'll pay you, and that covered my payroll. So there are things that you can do to be a little bit creative, but money is never the reason why you have to go out of business. Yep.
I have a question. How long have you been into business? The second question is, do you operate outside USA? If yes, how do you manage those businesses outside USA?
Yeah, so I've been working in tech since 2001. So, I've had a kind of a long career in this. And at the beginning in 2001, the tech scene in Utah was like Novell, and then some of the people that had left Novell and started some companies. So it wasn't a very big tech scene. And in the last 5 years, I've seen dramatic growth of what's happening in Utah, which is really exciting for anyone who wants to build a tech company here. And in that time, I did a lot of international business as well. So we launched products in about 80 different countries. And, one thing that was really interesting, that international expansion is fun, but it's also very expensive and very hard, because now you're talking about localizing your product, language, even like sometimes the colors don't work, and your marketing, and you have to find partners, or you have to put in an office. So it can be really expensive. With my last company, I had some partners, and we were going to expand in China. This was in 2017. And I went to China 7 months pregnant, because I was signing all these contract deals, right? And probably wouldn't advise it for most people, but it was that important because I knew that that was going to be the next growth phase for my company. Came back, we were working out all the deals, and I mean, it was going to be millions of dollars coming in from China. And then the trade wars happened, and they sent me a letter and said, we're not going to do business with the US company. And it just, there was nothing I could do. And then after that, I got a call from someone in Dubai, and they said, a sheik in Dubai wants to meet you and is interested in investing in your company. So I got on a plane and went to Dubai and, got to present to the Ministry of Education. They have so much money over there. It was like, it's crazy. And it's a country where in the US, we don't value expensive education as much as other countries do. Like they love to brag about how much they're spending. The more expensive, the better. So I could charge 3x for my product in Dubai, and if it was too cheap, they wouldn't buy it. Where in the US, it was just a different mindset. So went there, and then like nothing ever came of it. So it's one of those things where, these are incredible opportunities, but you really do need to weigh the risk that nothing can come of it at all because you're not there full time, So that's why a lot of companies will open an office there or, in a particular country or find distribution partners to ensure that that business gets sustained and implemented there.
So are you still operating in Dubai or you stopped?
Nope, not doing anything in Dubai. Yeah, it just was not. They promised big money. And when it didn't come, I was like, okay, I just can't invest my time and energy in there. So I mean, those are the lessons you learn through entrepreneurship, right? So I don't regret going and seeing what the potential is because it was good experience and certainly opened doors for other things. But it wasn't necessarily what I had hoped it would be.
So what advice can you give someone who wants to operate a business outside USA? What advice can you give such a person?
I think if you're going to be opening up a business outside the USA, I would get really ingrained with what the environment is like there, from fundraising to entrepreneurship to even government regulations that are happening there. And that may require that you live out there, unless you have people that you can trust to do that. But I would say too, like if you're a US based company looking to be international, for example, it's really hard if your first country is a foreign speaking language, because then you're all of a sudden, translating and localizing and doing all this stuff. So that's why, going to Australia or going to the UK or something like that, or Singapore, where it's also English speaking, so you can kind of work out the kinks there. And then recognize that like other countries have, like in Japan, for example, when we would translate products to Japan, in the US, we are okay with a certain amount of bugs and not everything being perfect when we roll out a product here in the US. We're like, how many times are we doing an iOS update, after they've done a big iOS update, right? They're doing these bug fixes. In Japan, they don't tolerate that. They want 100% perfection. So my advice usually is like, your first market shouldn't be Japan. Go out and work with another country or somewhere else where you can kind of work out those kinks before you do a country like Japan. And really then it's about, what is the market potential? Why we were so interested in China? The country's massive, lots and lots of potential to grow there, but if I were to localize, let's say in Dutch and go to Holland, then my potential is a lot much smaller. So I think it's just weighing out depending on the market, what your product is and who you're able to work with over there.
In 2001, there was barely Google.
Yeah,
Started.
yeah, that is true. I don't know if there was, I think we were using a lot of Yahoo at the time in AOL. So
That's around when I got my first cell phone, I think.
yeah, for sure.
So I have a business idea,
Okay,
and I was kind of leery on whether or not sharing it because it's not tech
okay, no, I'd love to.
savvy thing, but so what I've always loved finances in my life, and I've worked for, Citibank, Household Bank, lots of large banks across my career path, and I worked with credit cards. My last company, I was an auditing firm for a decade. I helped reduce businesses' credit card transactions by 50%. And you're right about Utahns, because I would contact people all throughout the country, some international, because we started growing there. And when you work with Utahns, it's just, they're so nice. It's just so much different. And I'm from Las Vegas too, and I grew up there for 30 years. Then I went back for a while because my dad had cancer, and just the people when you're on the phone with the doctor's office is like, get me back to Utah.
Yeah.
Because it's now it's more touristy than when I grew up there. But so anyway, but my business idea is I want to help people. I want to do a budgeting.
Okay.
I have a name for it, budget advisors, where I help people with their budget. And I want to take it a step up from that as well. My story is my husband and we both have mental health issues, and it's really hard for us to stop spending money. I'm sure, a lot of people have that issue. And so we got a financial planner that he got a power of attorney over us, and we turned our money over to him. And it's just been a huge, it's just been wonderful experience for us. And the first 2 years we paid off $7,000 in debt, and had a really nice emergency fund, and got we paid all of our living expenses, and it's just been a really great thing for us. And it took me a long time. It was 5 years in finding him, because I tried to go through some family members and some neighbors and everything, and he's an accountant. And so that's what I want to do, but I'm working with the SBDC, the Small Business Development Center in Gainesville. And so, and I just came back to school. I started my, when I worked for Citibank, they did tuition reimbursement. When I'm comparing myself to the 20-year-old Mary now, and it's just all different, because before it was just this and a book and a pen, but now we have the computer and the cell phone and the iPad, and there's so much to keep up with social media, so much more simpler in my days. But and so I went to school, and I'm just trying to, finish. When I started there, I ended up doing, I started a mission for the church, and then do cosmetology, which I always wanted to do, which I graduated and finished, but I walked away from that because there was no benefits, and everybody wanted their hair to look like the picture when it was too thin, so.
But your business is kind of that, your business idea or company idea is to help with budgeting and coaching.
Right.
Is it like, so to me, that can be a services.
Exactly.
Yeah, type thing. That's probably not a venture backable business. Not every company is a venture backable business. And I, like sometimes it looks really sexy to like raise a bunch of money, but if you can't, like, because if you're giving that advice, you can only handle so much. So your growth is not infinite, Now
I would be hiring people to be their people.
Yeah, so I would say, like, for you, I would probably not go the venture route. I'd probably try and bootstrap it and bring leverage, you're just building your model, right? So if it's like X number of people can bring in this much revenue if there's this much clients, then you can start to see how you scale. And an Excel spreadsheet is a great way to kind of visualize that, and get an understanding of that.
What was that called, spreadsheet?
Or just a Excel spreadsheet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but if you ever want to develop like technology tools around that, maybe it's like a software where they input their number or something.
I do, that's what I.
Yeah, and then
where do we start? Do we do I need a computer guy, I need the financial person to be over these people, and it's, and then with the SBDC, they do grants to get started too. So those are business grants. Yeah, and I think that's a good way to go for now.
And then once you start doing this, then, because you never want to build a product until you've kind of practiced. Like the great thing about like what Instructure did is they went and visited with 30 colleges and universities, like drove across the country, and they didn't write a single line of code until they had finished that product tour, because they had to truly understand what is it that people wanted. And what they did is they just built mock-ups in PowerPoint, down to the each click level and just started showing that to professors and students. And people say, well, I wouldn't really want this, I'd move this here or do that. And it wasn't until like they knew that everybody was consistently saying, yeah, that's perfect, yeah, that's perfect. Then they started coding. So I would, for you, with your business idea, is do that coaching and figure out what are the common things that people need, like, and how could technology, grow that, and then start looking for resources to build that. But I wouldn't build that first because you don't know what exactly to build.
Yeah, it's hard because mine's not a tangible product where you're selling clothes or
Right.
left Shark Tank and then they're selling what they have and they give samples, but mine's a service.
Yeah. Yeah, and there are tons of really successful services businesses that do this. Like, think of it like an open table where you can make a reservation online, right? That's really services.
Yeah, then I'm debating whether to, because with my generation, we always had the paper and the pen, and then when you go to shop, I see people still in the store with their paper and the pens. That's one easy way to, just have it in front of you instead of being on your phone switching everywhere else. But then I was thinking it's so digital, I'll probably just have to do an app or something.
Yeah, and that's a great way to go, but I would start building up
the paper and the pen, because when you meet with the financial planner, he's not gonna have your phone to see the app.
Right.
So you gotta kind of do that, but I have some, I think it's it, and then the SVDC, I have an appointment next week to meet with the consultant, and she and it's on the paper she gave me, they want to search my business name to see if anybody else has it. So I searched budget advisors and there's like nothing. It came up for a financial planner that wanted, $20,000 to be your financial planner to do investments. And so it's just simple. You have to get your budgeting down so you can invest.
Yeah, so I will say.
To be able to pay your living expenses and save to invest if you have your debt.
Yeah.
So that's where, because like I said, we searched a long time, and so that's my idea.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I know we're out of time. I can hang out here and answer any questions that you might have. But yeah, I really appreciate it, and hopefully this is helpful and insight into building a company. So, okay, thanks.